Shipwrecks are both mysterious and tragic, drawing us in with their haunting stories while hinting at the possibility of long-lost treasures and pirate gold. But sometimes, what's discovered inside these sunken relics is far more chilling than expected. From human skeletons to long-hidden secrets, here are 20 terrifying things found inside shipwrecks. Number 20. Human skeleton on Antikythera shipwreck. As is customary, we're poking about in this ancient old shipwreck of a trading vessel that sank off the island of Antikythera all the way back in the 1st century BC. Many treasures have been brought up from the shipwreck, but so much still remains secret down there, partly as a result of huge and inconvenient heaps of massive boulders. These big old rocks rest on top of the site, most likely having been dumped there during an earthquake all the way back in the 4th century AD. Inside, they found dozens of thrilling things and one decidedly creepy skeleton. It makes sense, even if it is a sinister reminder that shipwrecks aren't only about the treasure. They usually involve rather a lot of carnage as well. But we don't think too much about all that gloomy stuff. So what the heck else was on board? Amongst all the old junk and debris, archaeologists were extra excited to discover a weird ancient bronze disc of mysterious origin, an arm from a statue, and our old favorite, the Antikythera mechanism. So what in the world was all the fuss about this bronze disc? The object was circular, obviously made out of bronze again, and had a whole bunch of holes punched in it, as well as the image of a bull. The plot does thicken, but regardless of the fact that even the ancient history buffs don't know what it is, we have an idea now, don't we? Yes, you clever old devils, if it's round and mysterious, it must be aliens, because it's always aliens. Go ahead and prove otherwise. I dare you. Number 19. The Witta Galley Pirate Treasure. This was a fully rigged ship from the 18th century that was built to perform duties as a passenger, cargo, and heinously, a slave ship in the triangle trade. On the return leg of the maiden voyage of this vessel, the ship was then captured by pirate Captain Samuel Black Sam Bellamy. He sailed the ship up the coast of the American colonies and captured other ships along the way. During a violent storm in April of 1717, the ship was wrecked off the coast of Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Of the whole crew, only 2 of them survived, as well as 7 others that had been on a sloop that was captured earlier. Somewhat unfairly, 6 of the survivors were then hanged, 2 of them were freed, and then 1 was sold into slavery. The shipwreck and all the pirate treasure that was believed to have been on board were lost to the waves, and nobody knew where it was. That is, until 1984, when the wreck was found buried deep under as much as 50 feet of sand and water up to 30 feet deep. The wreckage was spread across 4 miles, but the discovery of the ship's bell and brass plate with the ship's name on it finally confirmed the vessel's identity in 2013. Number 18. Sunken World War II aircraft. In 2015, a whole bunch of different ocean exploration teams made a discovery in the waters about 30 miles off the coast of San Francisco, California. The United States aircraft carrier Independence was found. The ship had been hugely important and many times decorated during the Second World War. She was built in New Jersey in 1942 and joined the fleet in January of 1943. She took part in a deadly raid on Marcus Island shortly after that and then participated in attacks on Tarawa, Rabaul, Luzon, and Okinawa in the Pacific. She was then put out to use in transporting the troops home from the Pacific Front at the end of the war in what was known as Operation Magic Carpet. The ship received 8 battle stars for service during the Second World War and was then packed off to serve as a target vessel for the atomic tests in Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. During these tests, she received heavy damage and was then towed back to San Francisco for decontamination. In 1951, she was scuttled off the coast of San Francisco, where she remained intact in her watery grave, untouched until being rediscovered once again in 2015. These images capture the surprisingly intact aircraft carrier resting at the bottom of the ocean. Number 17. The USS Lexington. Up next, we have another United States aircraft carrier also from that same World War II era, except that this one went down during a battle and never made it back home. This is the USS Lexington. It was one of the very first aircraft carriers to be built by the United States. It was discovered by the crew of the research vessel Petrel at about 2 miles beneath the surface of the Coral Sea in waters about 500 miles off the coast of eastern Australia. This was where it had sunk in 1942, with the loss of 2,116 crew and the 35 aircraft that were on board at the time. The ship had originally been commissioned as a battlecruiser but was launched as an aircraft carrier all the way back in 1925. It was out in the ocean during the Second World War, fighting alongside the USS Yorktown against 3 Japanese carriers. This was the first carrier-on-carrier battle ever in history. The Lexington sustained serious damage after multiple hits from torpedoes and bombs during the 4 days of battle until finally sinking beneath the waves on the 8th of May 1942. A total of over 2,000 crewmen and officers were rescued by nearby American ships, and those rescued included the captain and his dog, Wags, the ship's mascot. The footage that was captured by the expedition that found the USS Lexington shows large guns and the blast shields that the ship once had. There are also lots of aircraft scattered across the seabed. Number 16. Civil War submarine. The H.L. Hunley submarine was the first submarine to successfully sink an enemy ship during wartime. Commissioned by the Confederate States of America during the American Civil War, the Hunley was a vessel designed to break the Union naval blockade of Confederate ports. It was a hand-crank submarine with a cylindrical iron hull that was around 40 feet long. It was crewed by 8 men who operated the sub by turning a crankshaft that propelled the vessel forward. It was a pretty rudimentary machine, but it did actually do what it was designed to do. Well, sort of. On February 17, 1864, it attacked and sank the USS Housatonic, which was a Union warship that had been blockading the port of Charleston, South Carolina. Although nobody's really quite sure how it happened, it seems as if the submarine had detonated a spar torpedo against the Housatonic's hull, which had caused it to sink quickly. But, as we are likely expecting at this point, the success of its mission was short-lived. Following that attack, the submarine itself mysteriously disappeared. It would not be until 1995 that the wreck of the Hunley was discovered off the coast of Charleston. Creepily, the submarine was found largely intact, with the remains of its crew still on board. It's now housed in a specially designed laboratory in Charleston, where researchers continue to study and preserve this somewhat sinister piece of naval history. Now it's time for today's topic. In a groundbreaking announcement, National Geographic confirmed that during their recent deep-sea expedition to the Titanic wreck, their divers uncovered a mysterious safe, locked for over a century beneath the icy Atlantic waters. The safe, discovered amid the decaying remains of the legendary ship, has become the centerpiece of the expedition's findings. After painstaking efforts to carefully retrieve and open the safe, the team revealed a bluish metal box nestled inside. The moment the lid was lifted, an air of mystery deepened. Within the box lay a small bag tied with a knot, along with several coins, likely from the early 1900s. The coins were gently examined, while the bag was placed in a protective container. The bag's contents, once revealed, left the team astounded. It held a collection of intricately designed necklaces and an assortment of rare coins. One particular necklace stood out, a diamond-encrusted piece engraved with the name Amy. Experts on site believe it could have belonged to a prominent passenger, but the true story behind its owner remains unknown. This discovery has sparked immense curiosity, with experts diving deeper into its historical significance. Could this necklace unlock untold stories of Titanic's fateful night? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Number 15. Spanish Galleon San Jose. Being a treasure hunter is genuinely a bona fide job, although most of the time, it's fraught with disappointment and is a generally underwhelming retrieval operation rather than a movie-esque, through the caverns lined with glittering golden artifacts, kind of thing. But perhaps the thing that drives these treasure hunters onwards is the hope of a life-changing haul of loot glinting off the ocean floor. This team of treasure hunters from Florida was diving off of Florida's east coast when they came across gold glittering in the shallow waters near Vero Beach. They were searching there as they had previously been lucky with a haul close by, but they never expected to find this gleaming cache of rare 18th century coins. Somewhat spookily, this treasure can be traced back to the wrecking of a fleet of ships that was voyaging through a treacherous hurricane on that exact same day it was discovered 300 years previously. Coins found in the hoard included some extremely rare pieces known as Royal Eights. These were, in particular, what made the find so very valuable indeed. The discovery of 350 coins came to an astonishing $4.5 million. Number 14. Medieval shipwreck. This is a shipwreck from the 13th century that was sunk off the coast of England and disappeared until 2019. Known as the mortar wreck, this ship was carrying large amounts of stone mortar bowls that were used in the process of grinding stone for building works. The ship was also carrying a bunch of heavy stone cauldrons, Gothic stone gravestones, and a load of raw marble, which had made the ship really heavy. It had sunk and become covered by a vast bank of sand. This had preserved the shipwreck to an unusually thorough extent. In fact, there's a suggestion that this could be the oldest preserved sunken ship in England. There are older ones like Bronze Age, but these are not very well preserved like this one. The trouble is that when you uncover a ship that's been preserved by sand, the minute that the water touches the wooden craft, it then begins to damage the structure. Meaning that although it was discovered, it was necessary to cover it up once again with sandbags in order to prevent instant deterioration of the structure itself. Number 13. 170-year-old beer. This is the wreck of a ship that sank off the coast of Finland all the way back in 1842, and there was apparently beer still on board. The 19th century beer was so fascinating to some Belgian beer makers that they decided to reconstruct it, and it's available to sample. The beer itself had been perfectly preserved in the 50-meter depths in which the wreck had settled, and somehow, the temperature had just been right to keep the beer in good condition. The beer makers had used all of their clever technology to test the microorganisms in the bottles and then figure out the type of yeast and bacteria that they had used to create the original beer in the 19th century. They were also able to use technology to determine the alcohol content, the color, and even the bitterness of the beer. Through chemical analysis, researchers discovered that the beer contained lactic acid bacteria, which contributed to its slightly sour taste. They also found that the beer was brewed using a top-fermenting yeast, a method still used in some traditional Belgian ales today. The experts noted that it had an unusually high sugar content, giving it a malty, almost caramel-like sweetness. In addition, traces of floral and spicy notes suggested that the original brewers may have used herbs or spices in place of, or in addition to, hops. The final reconstructed beer was brewed with all these historical elements in mind, allowing modern drinkers to experience a taste of the past. Number 12. Tiny shoes from the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic is the most famous and most retold story of disaster at sea. It's captured the imaginations of filmmakers and writers, as well as basically everyone else, in the century since it happened. The sinking on April 15, 1912, sent shockwaves around the world. It was, at the time, the worst civil disaster at sea of all time, and the seemingly needless loss of 1,500 lives was truly shocking. The story of the Titanic still haunts us today, and we continue to make films and TV shows retelling the story and seeking out the secrets of the ill-fated ship. Many of the lives that were lost on board the stricken ship, only 300 bodies were retrieved from the water. This sadly included one small boy, but this toddler's identity had remained a mystery. He was buried at the Fairview Lawn Cemetery in Halifax under a tombstone that simply said, "Unknown child." Although the Halifax police were supposed to dispose of all the clothing of the victims, a sergeant was unable to get rid of a tiny pair of shoes that had belonged to the little boy. Along with the exhumed remains from the grave, the tiny shoes allowed scientists to piece together the identity of the child, whom they believe was Aino Viljami Panula, who was 13 months old when he perished at sea. Number 11. 1,600-year-old shipwreck. This discovery in the waters off the coast of Caesarea, Israel, uncovered the wreck of not one but two ships. The marine archaeology team that were surveying the coast here found that the shipwrecks were not only full of artifacts, they were actually also super old. One of the vessels apparently sank about 1,700 years ago, and the other about 600 years ago. It seems that both had difficulties while attempting to come into port and both sank with the loss of all on board. But these things happened across a span of hundreds of years. There was a whole host of discoveries to be made, but one which got the archaeologists' knickers in a twist was a small gold ring. Apparently, this ring, although it doesn't look like a lot, is actually one of the earliest Christian symbols to have been discovered. The ring is made out of gold, containing a green gemstone into which the figure of the Good Shepherd was carved. The motif shows a young shepherd boy carrying a sheep across his shoulders, and the symbol is believed to be an early reference to Jesus that was used by Christians in the Roman era before the emergence of organized Christianity. It's believed that the ship upon which it was found had originally sailed from Italy before finding its way to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Number 10. Cursed warship with treasure. Back in the 16th century, this was the fiercest and most feared warship of the Swedish Navy. It was feared all over the world, but then, in 1564, it was involved in a huge naval battle and went up in flames. The disaster ended the lives of as many as 900 sailors and sent a vast pile of gold and silver treasure to the bottom of the sea. It was concealed beneath the waves for almost 450 years before the wreck was discovered. Now, researchers have decided that the ship is in such good condition, it may be the best preserved vessel of its kind anywhere in the world. There are so few examples of ships from the 16th century that naval historians know very little about them. Because of the remarkable condition of the ship, known as Mars after the Roman god of war, scientists want to leave it there, as moving it or changing its environment would likely result in damage and rapid decomposition of the ship. So, using all kinds of fancy and modern technology, they're taking three-dimensional scans and photographs to show the vessel and then recreate them out of 3D reconstructions. They're also able to reconstruct the last moments of the ship and attempt to work out what life may have been like on board. Number 9. Cannon from HMS Victory. This is a big old cannon that was recovered from the wreckage of the HMS Victory. It's thrilling stuff. The HMS Victory was wrecked in the English Channel in 1744, and more than 1,000 sailors lost their lives. In 2008, the wreckage of the warship was found by Odyssey Marine Explorations, and by 2014, they were recovering various bits and pieces from the shipwreck, including this big cannon, so as to try to prevent them from being damaged any further by the seawater. Then, great efforts were put in to salvage and preserve the cannon and other things that are now kept in a museum for the future. The discovery of the shipwreck and its artifacts provided invaluable insight into 18th century naval warfare, revealing intricate details about the craftsmanship of British warships at the time. The cannon itself, encrusted with centuries of marine growth, underwent a meticulous preservation process to prevent further corrosion and degradation. Experts analyzed markings on the cannon, confirming it was cast in the early 1700s and bore the insignia of King George II. Alongside the cannon, divers recovered pieces of gold and silver coinage, hinting at the possibility that the Victory was carrying a treasure when it sank. These discoveries fueled ongoing debates about the ownership of the artifacts and whether they should remain in the UK or be returned to the seabed as a memorial. Despite the controversy, the excavation efforts have ensured that this piece of maritime history will be preserved for generations to come. Number 8. The SS Thistlegorm. The British merchant navy ship, the SS Thistlegorm, was built in 1940, and then, within a year, she was sunk by German bombers during the Second World War. The vessel went down near Ras Mohammed in the Red Sea on October 6, 1941, and that wreck remained undiscovered for a few years until famous French oceanographer and filmmaker Jacques Cousteau rediscovered the shipwreck in the early 1950s. Cousteau had done some research in the area and gathered information from local fishermen, which then led to the discovery of the shipwreck. During dives to the wreck, Cousteau and his team recovered several items, including a motorcycle, the ship's bell, and the captain's safe. They also took a lot of photographs, which were featured in National Geographic magazine in February of 1956. That's where they showed the interior of the shipwreck and documented its contents. The SS Thistlegorm was carrying a cargo of vehicles, including trucks and armored cars, and also contained guns, ammunition, radio equipment, and aircraft parts. Most of the gear was headed to support Allied troops in Egypt when the ship was sunk. Number 7. Letters from 1941. Back in 2021, a group of archivists spent a long time piecing together a poignant puzzle. These are the fragments of a love letter from 1941 that were written by a woman named Iris. They were found about 3 miles below the sea in a shipwreck. The letter was written to an unknown serviceman who had been stationed somewhere in what is now Pakistan. The letter was actually never delivered, and it was one of 717 letters that were on board the cargo ship that was torpedoed off the coast of Ireland by a German U-boat in February of 1941. Only one of the 86 crew who were on board survived that sinking. The wreck was discovered in 2011, and many of the items on board were then recovered. Alongside the letters, researchers uncovered personal belongings such as pocket watches, photographs, and military documents, all offering a haunting glimpse into the lives lost at sea. Despite being submerged for decades, some of the letters remained remarkably legible, preserved by the cold, oxygen-deprived depths. Archivists painstakingly worked to reconstruct and decipher the fragile pieces of paper, revealing heartbreaking messages of love, longing, and hope for the future. One passage from Iris's letter expressed excitement about a future reunion that, tragically, would never happen. The discovery of these letters not only shed light on a forgotten wartime tragedy, but also served as a testament to the enduring power of human connection across time and distance. Number 6. Shipwreck in Gulf of Mexico. While out testing underwater drone equipment in the Gulf of Mexico, a team from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) came across a previously undiscovered shipwreck from the 19th century. They had managed to capture lots of images of the wreck, and they did seem to poke about a bit. They have determined that the vessel was likely a schooner or a brig of about 124 feet. The remains of the hull are more or less intact, but the ship's rigging is all but vanished. As they looked more closely, it seemed to the researchers that many of the timbers appeared charred, and some of the fasteners had apparently been bent. They reckoned that this was a strong indication the vessel may have been on fire when it sank. Further analysis of the wreck site suggested that the ship might have been carrying a highly flammable cargo, possibly coal or turpentine, which could have contributed to its fiery demise. NOAA researchers also noted the absence of any human remains, hinting that the crew may have escaped before the vessel went down. The lack of personal items and other artifacts on board supports the theory that the crew had time to abandon ship. Despite the extensive fire damage, some parts of the ship's structure remain surprisingly well preserved, offering valuable insight into 19th century maritime construction. Number 5. Titanic musician's violin. One of the most famous things that everybody learns about the disaster of the Titanic is that the band played on as the ship was sinking. The musicians that were set up on deck just kept on playing. The general consensus is that they played in an effort to keep the people calm during the catastrophe. There's an enduring image of the band playing as the ship sank around them. It's generally reported that they played for more than 2 hours as passengers tried to get on the lifeboats in the dark, cold early hours of April 15, 1912. They began with upbeat tunes like ragtimes and waltzes, as they had been performing in the first-class lounges of the ship until that night. These tunes would have helped to cover up the extremely distressing sounds of people panicking and crying. It may have also had some kind of effect on calming the desperate passengers down a little, as music can have such powerful effects on mood. But when they played their final song, the mood was more than universally somber. Although there are a couple of different accounts, it's generally believed that the final song was the hymn Nearer, My God, to Thee, which would have been to try and offer comfort in those final moments. It's said that the entire band perished on that night. Number 4. Titanic boots and a coat. There's a distinctly morbid fascination with all things Titanic related, and for some reason, there are plenty of people who are extra ghoulishly interested in staring at pictures of the graves of more than 1,000 people who lost their lives in the tragedy. So here, for those ghouls, are some more images. This is a coat and shoes that have been photographed in a recent submarine investigation of the wreck site. They captured the clothing in a way that appears to show that this is likely where a person perished, and these are the items they were wearing when they fell. It's extremely sad, and for some reason, people seem to like looking at it. The Titanic was an extremely large passenger ship carrying 2,223 people on her maiden voyage, and as such, its original design required 64 lifeboats. But when it came to the final decisions about such things, it was considered that the ship really didn't need so many. The ship's owners were concerned that having the full quota of lifeboats would clutter up the deck and create a terrible eyesore for all of those first-class passengers, and that was simply not going to do. So, in the end, they weighed up the idea of being able to evacuate all passengers safely against the unsightly view-spoiling effects of the correct number of lifeboats, and they went with a grand total of 20 of the things. It was actually generally accepted that ships would be under-equipped with lifeboats during this period of time. People assumed that even a sinking ship would remain on the surface for long enough to ferry passengers to safety. That is usually what had happened in previous incidents, but nobody foresaw the calamity that would befall the Titanic, or they probably would have had a whole lot more sense. So what of those 20 precious lifeboats? Well, there were 14 standard wooden ones with a capacity of 65 people each, and then there were 4 Engelhart collapsible boats that could hold 47 each, and 2 emergency cutters with space for 40. So, a quick calculation shows that carry the 1, then there's the 2, -3, about 1,178 people could have been saved. But over 1,500 people perished in the disaster. And of the already woefully inadequate lifeboat allocation, many pulled away from the sinking ship either half full or less. Number 3. The SS Andrea Doria. While cruising towards New York City in July of 1956, a passenger liner known as the SS Andrea Doria got into some difficulty. From a set of problematic conditions, things just seemed to get worse until the entire sorry event wound up in total calamity, with 52 people dead. The ship was using radar to assist her passage through treacherous thick fog while sailing near the coast of Nantucket, Massachusetts. Visibility was extremely poor, and the ship was relying on the radar technology to guide her through. The trouble with that is that, in order to properly use radar, it has to be read and interpreted correctly, and that's precisely what seems to have gone wrong. The Andrea Doria collided with the MS Stockholm, a Swedish passenger ship, which was traveling in the opposite direction. The Stockholm's reinforced bow, designed to break through ice, acted like a battering ram and tore a gaping hole into the Andrea Doria's hull. Water rushed in, causing the ship to immediately list to one side, which rendered half of its lifeboats unusable. Despite the chaos, the crew and passengers worked together to abandon ship, and nearby vessels, including the Isle de France, rushed to the scene to assist with the rescue efforts. The Andrea Doria managed to stay afloat for 11 hours before finally capsizing and sinking beneath the waves. A total of 52 people perished. The remaining 1,660 were rescued. Number 2. A large head. Here we are once again back at the Antikythera wreck. I know it's a thrill a minute around here. This time, we're watching as archaeologists remove a massive marble head from the shipwreck. The head is apparently one that belonged to a statue of Hercules in Athens' National Archaeological Museum, but it had been going around all of these years without its head. Further examination of the head revealed intricate details, including a finely sculpted beard and expressive facial features, characteristic of ancient Greek artistry. Experts believe the statue was originally part of a larger collection of valuable sculptures being transported on the ill-fated ship. The discovery of the head has fueled excitement among historians, as it may lead to further exploration of the wreck site for additional missing fragments. Some researchers suggest that the ship could have been carrying a treasure trove of artworks meant for a Roman aristocrat or even an emperor. Alongside the marble head, divers also recovered a pair of lead anchors and several bronze nails, hinting at the ship's structural remains still buried beneath the seafloor. The two may finally be reunited. Number 1. Antikythera mechanism. A trading ship sank off the coast of the island of Antikythera in the Mediterranean Sea during the first half of the 1st century BC. This wreck has proven to be the site of such enormous archaeological significance as it's revealed its secrets over the years. One such revelation was that of a mechanism that belies all previous understanding of how advanced the use of geared mechanisms actually was during this time. Until the discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, there had been no such discovery of any engineering that involved gears. In fact, it was not believed to have been in use until medieval cathedral clocks were built over 1,000 years later. The mechanical device is believed to have been used for calculating and displaying information about astronomical phenomena back in ancient Greece. This was obviously cutting-edge technology and is actually surprisingly sophisticated. It's been scanned, and the resulting radiographic imagery shows that there are 30 gear wheels that form part of the internal mechanism of the machine. So, this may be difficult to explain in some respects, but only because historians had not yet discovered the true extent of the knowledge and skills of ancient people. It may just add as much mystery to the matter as it explains. That's all from the depths of the world's most haunting shipwrecks today. Which of these discoveries did you find the most terrifying, or did you find them all simply fascinating? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other cool videos showing up on the screen, and I'll see you next time.